Chapter 36 Wine in the Time of Drought. Southern California is a desert. As you enter our airspace from the east, you feel like you're orbiting a Martian landscape. No need to rocket off to Mars. You can see it all from a window seat in economy class, or better yet, drive through with an off-road vehicle. Red sand and dunes. No people, no trees, no water, except a salty Salton Sea. And then a checkerboard, various shades of green, irrigated farmland, food grown in the desert, nourished by the Colorado River. Welcome to Imperial Valley. Continue west. Notice the areas irrigation doesn't touch. The land is brown and barren. Rising rock ridges pierce the valley floor, lunar landscape, a wasteland seen from the sky. But where there's water, there's green, there's life. Further west, mountains rise higher, grabbing moisture from the marine layer, rainfall in winter, even snow. Brush, trees, forests blanket the western slope of this range. Look south, there's the Mexican border, and then from 35,000 feet, the ocean, due west, scattered ranches, more green, housing developments, cooler temperatures, shrub, trees, a patch of Torrey pines. The plane descends flying over the zoo, over Balboa Park, a few feet above rooftops. Touchdown! At the end of spring, until November, San Diego's land is parched, bone dry, concrete. And then, tap, 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 tap. A single stick, rapping a snare drum. The first drops tiptoe from the sky, announcing the arrival of the rainy season. The tap-tap-tapping crescendos in two sticks, then double time. The storm accompanied with gusts of wind. Hanging fronds of palms levitate, point opposite the sea, guiding rain where to land, and a path for howling wind. Pellets hit baked clay, drops gather into puddles, hardened earth softens. Gravity pulls drops down the slope, slowed by a sprouting weed here, a clump of leaves there. 2 and 2 makes 4, 4 and 4 makes 8, 8 squared makes 64, 64 squared makes a movement. Drops band together into a stream in numbers. The people united will never be defeated. How does a water drop split a boulder and rip apart a mountain? One drop at a time. The drum roll increases. Rain falls faster. Droplets flow into streams. Streams carry dirt particles to the back of a retaining wall, are slowed for a moment, but not deterred. History is on their side. Gravity is on their side. Laws of nature are on their side. Never give up. Downward proceeding, never receding, water hits the wall, then veers in the direction that is down. Always heading down, down, down the slope of the hill, some seeping underground, through topsoil, penetrating clay, a superwoman, superman, superperson passing through a concrete wall, the power of water falling from the sky, magic water, blessed water, holy water that has been prayed for, wished for, dreamed of. Dogs dance like children in the rain. A childlike farmer looks up to the sky and opens his mouth to catch a sip and spin circles celebrating the water of life. Dogs rollick and roll in the mud, precious mud, rare mud. I have missed you for a year. Glorious red, ochre, paste of mud paint, finger paint, reddish, rusty, magnificent mud squishing between fingers of a farmer turned kindergartner, drawing finger trails of mud on the stuccoed retaining wall, then shoveling the mud, make the path straight, raise the berms, cut into the mountain, shape the earth while you have the chance. Take the shovel, carve a flat trail into the hill. Ouch! Watch your back. Ow! Threw out my back. You'll be visiting the chiropractor. You could have hired a guy to do this work for what you're going to pay the doctor to crack your back. Don't look back. You could have hired 2 guys for a month, but you refused to hire Miguel to save some money, and it ends up costing more. Because the rain fell and the earth was soft and you had to shovel the mud and carve the path while you could. Sheila calls from the house, "Bring Bluey inside. I don't want him catching cold." Because, she says, when a dog gets sick, it's hard on them. Please bring him in now. So Paul leads him to the front porch and turns on the hose and sprays large paws to rinse off the mud, because somebody's gonna have to pay if dirt is tracked into her house, and he sprays hairy legs as best he can while the dog snaps furiously at the water because he loves water, and Paul starts firing the hose at his fur, and he barks louder trying to catch the water with his mouth, and he's barking in sheep herding mode. More, 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 and Paul aims for his caked wiggle butt, but he turns around keeping his rear down and away, his jaws snapping, crushing, lunging at the water stream. Paul wishes he had the fire chief's hose, because that's the only way to hose down this dog. When Sheila hired the mobile cleaning dog crew with the cute Aussie painted on the van's panel, the gal said, "I can handle any Aussie." And when she tried to pick up Bluey, she confronted a bull in the ring who refused to be washed, couldn't be calmed even by a professional, and he left her souvenirs of red scratches the length of her white arms. Aussie scratches. Paul gives up and lets him inside, where Sheila's covered the floor with enough towels to fill a laundromat, and they wrap him in swaddling clothes, and he's peaceful as a baby, because wrapped tight he can't squirm, and he looks into their eyes with baby blue eyes, and they pet and pat him dry and release him from his bonds, and he's off, a galloping racehorse through the house, shaking water, snorting, drying himself on carpets, the sofa, her bed, and there's nothing like the smell of wet dog in the morning, and hopefully wet dog smell is only on your clothes, towels, rug, couch, and bed, and not in the wine, though they advertise hair of the dog free in every bottle. Winter storms in San Diego unfold as surfers' waves, paced rhythmically apart, that roll on shore, dissipate, then start again. Every storm is different. No rain is alike, but rain here is often gentle, not Texas downpours that release 10 inches in an hour. 2 inches, more or less, over 24 hours. Carrie Ann measures in her rain gauge, then tallies the yearly total. There are rarely deluges. When there are, they're short bursts. During the course of a typical San Diego winter storm, rain falls for an hour or so, announced by the lone snare drum, followed by a drumming brigade that fades. Skies clear for a couple of hours, then another wave of showers passes. A peaceful storm permits drought-stricken land to soak up water. The dried sponge becomes soft, damp, wet. Does the Pacific get her name from pacifist rainstorms? Paul measures rainfall by dipping his index finger to the bottom of his favorite bucket, left outside, observing the height of the watermark, each crease marking an inch. A finger completely submerged indicates a real rain and close to 3 inches, a soaker. "That's a knuckler," said Carrie Ann, water that seeps deep, deep, deep down, eventually 3 feet underground, then 6 feet where roots stretch. Sheila places red lugs and trash cans at the top of the hill to catch water, and after the ground dries, she'll bucket that water to thirsty avocados, blood oranges, pamplemousse, her roses. Does her catch and release watering help? No matter, it helps her soul, quenching the thirst of her trees, shrubs, plants, and flowers by hand. In the valley below, Carrie Ann harvests water from her roof into 700-gallon containers. Miguel built her a catch system, a collection of water towers that come in handy in summer. Rain starts up again, and Paul leaves the damp, drying dog inside, who looks outside the window, panting. He wants to follow Paul up the hill, but she won't let him outside, because when a dog gets sick, that's tough. Paul looks at the empty swallow's nest under the eaves of the highest point of the house, wondering, when are they going to return, and where are they now? In sunny South America? He remembers their neighbor Andrea, who's in Argentina preparing for her Malbec harvest, and thinks after he's done working and soaked to the bone, he'll come inside and take a long, hot, steamy, therapeutic shower, then try one of her locally made Malbecs. She asked to store 10 cases in their garage, and they didn't have much space, but since she helped them at harvest, they're happy to help her, and answered, "Yes, we'll sell her your wine, but there's no guarantee we won't try some." Paul remembered when they visited France and purchased a case of wine in Pauillac, vinted the year of Kate's birth, and a case of Medoc from Alex's birth year, and left them in Mary France's cellar and never saw a bottle again. When their children returned to France, they might find a bottle hidden in a crevice of the cave on their 60th, 70th, 80th, or 100th birthday, after they cash in their inheritance of 47 Phoenix Canarias palm trees, 5 barrels of high-proof American cognac, 5 barrels of American Armagnac, and 1,000 cases of port wine. Paul turns his attention downwards to the flow of water to inspect the damage. Where is water overflowing channels and carving small canyons through vineyard rows? Water droplets gather into a microstream that merge into mini streams carrying microparticles downhill, then larger bits of earth, and within an hour, what seems to your eyes to be a mini crack, to an ant, is a veritable gorge, a fluvial fan, a miniature Grand Canyon. If he finds a fallen vine, he binds her up, and where he finds signs of erosion, the beginnings of the next Palo Duro, he creates barriers with his metal rake and shovel, a berm, a levee, a mini dam, or places a bale of hay, or lays down a straw wattle, a giant straw-stuffed sausage, the length of a dragon, a Chinese dragon. It's the new year. Gong Shi Fa Cai. He performs a dragon dance with his dog, released for good behavior on his own reconnaissance, and carries the dragon's head followed by the long tail, dragging, laying it across the slope of the hill, then slaying it with wooden stakes hammered through straw skin through the heart, fastening it to the earth to slow the flow of water. The dragon transports his memory to Beijing, to a theater, listening to an opera's orchestra. Cha, 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 chaka, cha, 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 chaka, boing, 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 boing. As the small percussion section keeps beat, then a melody begins, a siren singing about her longing for a villager, but she's confined inside an earthly woman's body when she's a 1,000-year-old cultivated snake goddess. Christine translates, whispering softly into his ear. His mind returns to the vineyard and rows of dormant vines with no need to worry about snakes. They're dormant too, sleeping, hibernating. He picks up his shovel and scrapes mud from behind a vine, forming a mini dam around the vine's trunk so water will be trapped and seep down to the depths of the root's tentacles. At dusk, 2 days before Christmas, Paul hauls leaves down to the green recycled containers. Cross-training, he tells himself as he and Bluey race up the vineyard to fetch another container of leaves he carries down the hill. Isometric exercise for biceps, shoulders, and thighs. They head back uphill for the next container and down again. Not one leaf or twig is allowed safe harbor. Carrie Ann and her crew gather leaves and send them through a chipper to shred and compost. Thrusting a shovel through her rich, moist compost pile severs a dozen worms, a wet blanket she'll use to cover the root zone of fruit trees and her vegetable garden. Paul pulls Kelly green thistle from the earth with bare hands and is stung by 1,000 microscopic needles and wonders, how did I end up with a life weeding the day before Christmas Eve? What did I do to deserve such punishment? He knows the answer and carries on. Prepare the wine to hand out to the garbage guys, Sheila reminds him. Paul tips delivery people, watermen, vineyard workers, Uber drivers, sanitation engineers, the Starbucks barista, everyone with a bottle of wine. Gifts to co-workers of wine. He inserts a bottle and orange into the Christmas stockings of his wife, grown children, and dog, while Sheila adds a large reed avocado to Bluey's stocking. Before the rains, only a pickaxe breaks the crusty old earth, and it's easy to slip on small marbles of decomposed granite. The days after a rain, there's solid footing as Mother Earth allows herself to be molded and planted. Paul gets on his knees and with his hands makes mudden crown molding for major paths, kneading clay with fingers, remembering sandcastles with his parents at Delmar Beach and mud pies with neighbors' kids. He gathers the best clay into a ball and brings it to Sheila to throw a pot with her wheel. untouched in the shed since the president's visit. She used to enjoy making ceramic bowls, and they purchased a potter's wheel, and then she stopped when they moved to the country. He could never bring himself to throw it out, in case she wanted to spin the wheel again someday. "I brought you a present," he said, holding up that clay. "Are you stupid? You can't make a pot with that. How did the Indians make pots?" She stormed off to rake leaves. She, too, an unpaid servant to the vines. She couldn't rest until every leaf in the vineyard had been raked, every weed pulled, every stick bundled. After lunch, Paul suggested, "Why don't you take a nap?" "How can I relax? I'm not finished." "There's no rush. The leaves will be there tomorrow. I can't wait." And she went back outside to rake more piles for him to haul down the hill. Her work never finished, nor his. He pulls a flathead shovel from the tool bin and walks up the hill. "It's almost Christmas. Make the path straight. Level the mountain. Prepare ye the way of the road. Cut the path into the side of the hill. Move the dirt to the downhide side of the path to make the berm." Any rocks he uncovers he places around trunks as a decorative necklace to slow erosion. Each winter, 100 men his age die of cardiac arrest shoveling snow. "I don't want to be the one who dies shoveling mud," he says, thanking the wine for protecting his heart. There are no studies proving wine prevents back injury, and his reward is an unexpense-paid trip to the chiropractor, untimely ending path carving this year. A week after 2 inches of rain soaks into the ground, barren vines swell before your eyes, their muscles bursting through skins of bark, and fresh weedlings sprout. Paul encourages the good weeds to grow as a natural cover crop. Joe's vineyard is like Mars, inhabited by walking stickmen, since Miguel's crew sprays Roundup to choke weeds before they become unsightly. Carrie Ann, proud of her sustainable vineyard, observes her crop of fava beans grow, which she'll eventually toss into a stew. When Paul sowed barley seeds one year, he fattened the quail and doves, and finally gave up seeding a cover crop and encouraged the good weeds, especially the yellow mustard. Paul's New Year resolutions include growing their own vegetables, and he purchases baby tomato plants, basil, eggplant, romaine lettuce, and squash, planting them in the garden he cornered off with cinder blocks. Sheila waters the garden until the weather turns too warm, and in her service to the grapes, the garden withers, while the vines flourish, until the 3rd year of drought, when they faced water restrictions. Although California's drought is universal, how it impacts you depends on where you live. At the time of this story, most residents of California's cities turned on their faucets and water flowed. There wasn't a sense of urgency, unless you were one of the unlucky ones living in the Central Valley, who one day turned on the water and nothing came out. Households with wells lost their water when the underground water table sank below the level of their wells. Part of the problem was big agriculture, with big bucks drilling deep wells that undercut residents' shallower wells. Meantime, because of continuing drought, the water table, reservoirs, and mountain snowpack receded to record lows. California's drought is a marathoner, a good one, an ultra-marathoner, so persistent. The governor ordered a 35% reduction in statewide water usage after voluntary conservation resulted in average savings of 9%. How do you extract more water from a stone? Easy. Make water as expensive as gas. That'll stop the waste. Since water continued to run for almost everyone and cost about a penny per gallon instead of $2.50, how could there be a crisis? There were signs. Restaurant waiters asked if you wanted water before automatically serving it, not so much to save the cup you might drink, but to save the gallon to run your glass through the dishwasher. There were mandates not to water grass. You could tell the good citizens with brown lawns from the bad with green lawns. These were inconveniences most people could live with, even when it got worse. The next year at the restaurant, they served your meal on a paper plate so they didn't need to wash your dish. When Paul was in college, he put a brick in his toilet to reduce the volume of each flush. Now he used a 1-gallon plastic container. These were small gestures to save water, though they added up. more was necessary. The Western Hemisphere's largest desalination plant finally opened in 2015 on Carlsbad's shores in San Diego County, with capacity to convert enough seawater to serve 400,000 residents' annual needs. The situation became so dire, local officials were finally toilet trained by a drought more powerful than parents, who reluctantly moved forward to convert wastewater into drinking, unaffectionately called toilet to tap. The water crisis was brought home to the vignerons of the Hidden Hills when helicopters circled overhead looking for greenbelts, and armed water police arrived carrying clamps to shut off water meters of those who exceeded their allotments. Then, drones equipped with ultra-high-resolution infrared moisture-detecting cameras buzzed over the vineyards in search of underground leaks, scrambling hummingbirds who initially panicked until the feathered flying darts regained their composure and outmaneuvered the drones. In the great state of California, the world's cornucopia of almonds, apricots, cherries, and strawberries, avocados were chopped from the all-star list as growers along the aptly named Avocado Highway section of the 15 amputated trees to meet mandatory water reductions. The Avocado Highway now runs from Mexico to Peru over to New Zealand. It wasn't profitable to grow avocados in San Diego unless you had huge economies of scale or free well water, which the Soviet government of California planned to nationalize or at least meter, or if growers formed a cartel, raised prices, and petitioned Uncle Sam to limit imports. How much are consumers willing to pay for a locally grown avocado? $5? $10? At some point, there's a limit. The dry, parched, sunburned state of California didn't wear sunscreen, didn't carry a sun umbrella, and didn't construct enough storage facilities and reservoirs to accommodate the thirst of agribusiness and a growing population. Agriculture accounts for 60% to 80% of California's annual water consumption. So when conservation is necessary, the first to be hit with mandatory restrictions are farmers and growers. This is the risk growers accept in exchange for discounted rates in years water is plentiful. Everything possible is done to avoid mandatory restrictions on household consumers. Yet, it was only a matter of time until the unthinkable happened. Paul tried dry farming, a row of vines that withered and died the first year of drought. Since dry farming wasn't going to work, he tried to minimize irrigation, reasoning he had planted vines with drought-tolerant rootstock bred to take it. He wanted to test, the same way he'd take a hammer to a shock-resistant watch when he was a kid, but with less force to the vines. Paul limited watering during the growing season, reducing his yield, with the consolation that the surviving fruit was a concentrated fruit bomb. But there was an important time he chose to hydrate his flock. 2 days after harvest, he gave them a big drink to encourage the vines to generate and store energy for next year's spring push, like a bear or rattlesnake gorging before hibernation. To save more water, he took short commando showers. He placed 2 5-gallon buckets under the shower head to catch water during the 30 seconds it took to warm up. He turned off the valve and used the hot water to lather and scrub, except his scalp, because he didn't want to wash away good microbes. He turned on the shower 30 seconds to rinse. After drying, he carried the buckets to the thirstiest vines, and when he returned to the house, Sheila said, "Would you mind not putting soap on my vines?" From then on, soapy water was only used on succulents, shrubs, and trees. Quick showers were easy in the heat of summer, but when autumn arrived, Paul shivered. Cold showers build character, he told himself, echoing his soccer coach, who said, "Good thing you're tough," when they grimaced after twisting an ankle, blowing out a knee, or butting heads. One Monday morning after the harvest, Paul was jogging through the vineyard with Bluey and heard the pitter-patter of rain, although the sky was blue, and discovered water streaming along a small block of 40 Petit Syrah vines where the irrigation valve had been left open 2 days. Fuck. It was the last call for vines before the bar closed, and he forgot to turn off the tap. 40 vines multiplied by 2 gallons per hour equals 80 gallons per hour times 48 hours equals 3,840 gallons wasted. He estimated the water he saved from commando showers. 1 shower per day saved 5 gallons equals 1,825 gallons saved per year, which means during the 2 days he forgot to turn off irrigation to one small block of vines, he wasted twice as much water as he conserved. "Do you have Alzheimer's?" Sheila asked. Paul found some comfort when he learned he wasn't the only one who had forgotten to turn off an irrigation valve. The Cougar and Merlot Mac confessed to worse lapses, and when Joe the wino went on vacation and instructed Miguel to water the vineyard, he irrigated every day, not once a week. Paul realized he and other growers were the problem. As winter turned to spring with seasonal storms, or without seasonal storms, he delayed his first irrigation to that block of 40 satiated vines and asked Carrie Ann about her plans for dealing with water restrictions. At bud break, water like a stampede of stallions breaking loose at the apocalypse to ensure good fruit set, Carrie Ann said, then cut back during veraison. It's sound advice, thought Paul, but that sounds like business as usual. He wanted to postpone the start of irrigation as late as possible to save water, figuring the vines as stored reserve energy, and consulted an expert at University of California, Davis, one of the foremost institutions on grape growing and winemaking, who asked, "How much water did you give the vines after harvest last year?" "A drenching." "Sounds like you've done everything correctly and the vines should make it through bud break." With that affirmation, Paul held back water. "The vines are thirsty. Good. Let them search for water. If that doesn't kill them, it'll make them stronger and toughen them up for worse drought in the future." He watched green shoots touch the first wire with ease. The first spray of organic sulfur was called in, and without watering, the vine stretched to the top wire. And then, like so many marathoners who hit the wall, the vines were dehydrated and cried out in thirst, and Paul, hearing their cries, gave them a drink. And for some it was enough to revive, and they picked up their pace and ran past the next water station without slowing down. But for others, the water was too late. They became disoriented, requiring a trip to the emergency room, their bodies shutting down en route, as Paul the paramedic administered CPR, pumping the vine's chest with his hands, careful not to crack their ribs, blowing the breath of life on their leaves, then administering an IV drip. The dehydrated vines produced little fruit, and by early July their leaves were yellow, their edges browning, as faded as they should be at the end of the growing season, not the middle. "Hey, amigo!" Miguel yelled, causing Paul to cringe. "You're underwatering your vines. They're really stressed. You want me to water them for you?" "No, thank you. I'm saving water." "You're damaging your vines." "Only a few are damaged. Most have survived. I'm saving water and toughening them up. These vines will be stronger than yours if the drought continues." "You should look at Joe's vines. They're beautiful." "That's because you're not cutting back water. Your vines look like shit." You're probably not surprised that Joe, who disdained the government that taxed his business, forced him to purchase health insurance for his employees, and issued irritating rules to regulate his wine operations, ignored the governor's conservation edicts, and ordered Miguel to turn up the spigot, to stick it to the man. Of course, he was the man. In springtime, as the ground hardened and weeds began dying off from rising temperatures, Joe's vineyard was lush. He remained under the radar of the water police by digging a well on his property without a permit. It was his land. Why did he need permission from the government to drill a well on his land? And he camouflaged the well so it escaped notice by patrolling helicopters. It was Joe who sounded the first alarm when the government sought to meter, control, and tax wells citizens had drilled on their property, blaming the goddamn socialist president, who was not only confiscating constitutionally protected firearms from citizens, but also their water from their land. Paul's strategy for making good wine in the vineyard during the time of drought was to allow grapes to ripen quickly and harvest early, unlike normal years when he tried to lengthen the gestation by irrigating to lower acids, keep sugars from rising too high, and prevent grapes from shriveling during the heat wave. In theory, harvesting early was a good approach for less acidic grapes with higher pHs, such as his Tempranillo, but not with the Zinfandel and Aglianico, which had high acid and needed a longer ripening period and irrigation to bring the acids down. To ration his water, Paul sacrificed the Zin, diverting their water to other varietals. The Zin harvest was a meager 200 pounds and only produced 10 gallons of wine, 48 bottles of the sweetest elixir, and worth its weight in gold, considering all the expense he incurred producing it. He called it Jane's Port because he would travel 3,000 miles for a taste of this wine as he would for a taste of its namesake's lips. And whenever he returned home from his travels, he poured himself a dram as a welcome home libation. He sent Jane a bottle with this letter. Dear Jane, I just returned from Seattle, where it rained every day, and I feared my dried-out bones would melt in that emerald city, suffering the fate of the wicked witch who liquidated faster than Tillamook cheese squeezed between bread and a searing panini grill. I walked along Lake Union's docks, looking at yachts, taking notes for the time we visit together, rent one for the weekend, and putter up Puget Sound. As the waters open, you slip into a wetsuit and into the waves and into skis, and the boat accelerates, pulling you up, and you crisscross the wake of orcas who clear a path for you through the sea. You pull yourself onto the boat, and we cruise further north, threading the needle between Whidbey and Camano Islands into Skagit Bay and into La Conner, where we dock, debark, and dine with Tom Robbins, with whom we discuss the adventures of two star-crossed water molecules as they travel through the circulatory system of a vine, become separated, end up in different grapes, then are reunited in wine, separated again when the wine is poured into different glasses. Why can't they just hang on to each other, and through a miraculous kiss are rejoined when our lips meet? The next morning we return to Seattle, filling our ice chests with salmon we catch from trolling lines, pass through the Ballard Locks, where you toss a fish to the sea line, barking louder than Bluey, onto Lake Union, and return to port, where we share a special wine, aptly named Port, to commemorate the journey. About that wine I gave you, grown in the time of drought, vinted from concentrated Zinfandel grapes dying of thirst, when crushed, extracting juice was harder than squeezing blood from a stone. We let the sugars rise to astronomical levels, over 36 bricks, with a preponderance of grapes, wrinkling many into full-fledged raisins. During the cold soak bath after picking, the bricks of the must, assaulted by an onslaught of raisin sugar bombs, rose above the scale, off the charts, through the stratosphere, over 40 bricks, resulting in the darkest, most concentrated, luscious, thick, chewy, syrupy elixir ever. I'm not allowed to name it after the sweet wines of the Iberian Peninsula, but I shall call it port, because when returning to my home base after so many travels, this is my go-to welcome home beverage. A tender taste on my lips, I imagine as sweet as yours, and to honor my muse for all of your encouragement, I've christened it with your precious name, Jane, and in the fullness of time, may my home base be called the same as this wine, the Port of Jane. Behold, a bottle of Jane's Port. May it please you and fill you with fond memories of our times together in the past and in the future. Cheers, Bootlegger. A drop of water's journey is as remarkable as the salmon's life cycle. Setting aside desalination plants and toilet to tap, odds are a drop of water dripping from a San Diego faucet began its downhill adventure as water vapor in a cloud over the Sierra Nevada mountains or the Colorado Rockies, condensed into a parachuting snowflake until it hit a mountaintop. The decision it makes at a fork determines its ultimate fate. Turn right it ends up in the Mississippi instead of the Colorado River. Turn left, and it might be thrown against a piece of shit flushed into a putrid septic tank. Water's worst nightmare, but somebody's got to do it. Not every drop of water could nourish a vine, rehydrate infant formula, or body surf in Del Mar. Nature and science states all water particles are exactly the same, created equal from the moment of inception. Two elements of hydrogen bonded with one element of oxygen, commonly called H2O. But are they? Have you attended water school and seen for yourself? Some water is selected for the college-bound track and destined to nourish manicured lawns of the prestigiously private University of San Diego, while other water is funneled off to trade school, spigoted into a bucket, and used to mop floors of restaurant kitchens. The rogues, the greasers, the problem children who wanted nothing to do with school dropped out to catch a wave at Swami's, or even better, to become the wave. Many of those who remained were caught in currents they couldn't swim against, feeling they had little choice. Others accepted their fate, believing if they led pure lives, they would be rewarded with a kinder, gentler next time around, because after water was consumed, pissed, spat, or drunk by plants, the believers, the chosen, the raptured, would be taken up back to the stream, down to the ocean, and from that heavenly body, their sun goddess, casting powers of evaporation, would raise them up, and once transfigured, the moisture molecules would rise into clouds, ride high winds over a mountain range, then descend again in glory, back into the world as rain or snow, beginning the journey again. Since human beings are composed of 50% water, and water is reincarnated, it's almost enough to make you believe in reincarnation. I'll ask the bishop about it next time. Strange things happened during the drought, when the vines were supposed to go dormant. In October, they sprouted new shoots and baby grapes. Paul wondered, are the vines wasting energy they'll need in spring? Have they gone crazy? Are there polar bears in the middle of the ocean without ice? Carrie-Anne reassured him. Don't worry, the vines know what to do. So he stopped worrying. That Indian summer lasted until the end of January with daytime temperatures above 70 Fahrenheit degrees, and Paul took advantage of the warm weather to shower quickly outside on the terrace. The vines interrupted the warm temperatures as a signal to start their engines, and the Tempranillo started bud break in January, 2 months early, followed by the Petite Sirah and Grenache. Fortunately, or so it seemed, cooler, more seasonable temperatures returned, with Paul and Sheila covering themselves with thick wool sweaters and huddling like coal rabbits in their hutch, missing the winter heat wave, but accepting that cool weather must return. So the Tempranillo, Petite Sirah, and Grenache slowed down, and for the most part matured their normal time at August end and produced some of the finest wines they ever made. The other varietals, namely the Zinfandel and the Aglianico, were totally confused and unsure when to wake up, stayed indoors until late May. "What did you do to my vines?" Sheila demanded. "Nothing," Paul responded. "It's the weather." "I don't believe you. Miguel must have sprayed them with Roundup." "Look, they're alive," he said, cutting off a piece of spur, showing her it was moist. Wine is patience. Paul called Carrie-Anne, Merlot Mac, and the other wine growers in the area, and they too reported strange behavior among their vines, while Miguel confirmed it was a bizarre season at other vineyards throughout the county. "The vines must be crazy," said Carrie-Anne. "But you're the one who always says the vines know what to do." "It's just higgledy-piggledy." With half the vines out of production, there was only half the work to do. "At least we don't have to net those vines and worry about birds," Paul told Sheila, looking on the bright side. "You always wanted a vineyard to look at without having to worry about making wine. Here's your chance." Paul focused his attention on the remaining grapes, and with less work, he felt, for a moment, as if he had half his life back, reaching the point where he suggested, "Let's plant a garden." "Go ahead," Sheila answered. "Do it yourself." and he realized if he had to go it alone, maybe he really didn't have enough time for a garden. And with his full-time daytime job, caring for the vineyard on weekends and caring for wine in the winery, something had to give, and that was going to be a garden. So he drove a case of wine down the hill to Garden of Eden Organics and traded wine for veggies, donating an extra case for the people. In the age of drought, the good citizens of the United States' most southwest city did all the little things they could to save water. In the grand scheme of things, Paul, as an agricultural grower, was a water hog, since he had 2,000 vines to nourish, whereas millennials in downtown apartments had a small water footprint. He felt an extra responsibility to conserve as much water as possible. He placed a white 2-gallon bucket in the kitchen sink to catch non-soapy water, and in this way, he was finally allowed to save table scraps for composting, telling Sheila he would water her roses with the rescued water. He filled the bucket with used coffee grounds, telling her if he put coffee grounds into the bucket, it would prevent her sink from getting clogged and nourish her roses. And skins from peeled carrots and potatoes, gnawed artichoke leaves, scraps from preparing meals, clearing and rinsing plates. Pomegranate bushes tolerated the drought and kept producing glossy red ornaments. He brought a bucketful into the house to eat, juice, and infuse with eau de vie. "Don't eat the seeds, they're bad for you," Sheila warned. Paul grew up eating the seeds and never heard a word about a health hazard. But after her comments about soapy water being bad for plants, she was correct. Her warning after Kate was born they needed to vacuum the carpet every day to combat dust mites, she was correct in that too. When 15 years later scientists proved the link between dust mites, children, and asthma, he had reached a point in his life where he realized he should listen to her. So he believed her about pomegranate seeds, and since she wouldn't appreciate him spitting chewed seeds in her sink, he spit the wad of chewed seeds into the bucket and carried it with the other scraps to the compost pile. His chore each morning was to pour liquid from the slop bucket around roses and vines and dump solid scraps into the compost. He rinsed the bucket, pouring rinse water around the citrus trees. When Paul said, "Don't worry, I'll empty and rinse the bucket every day," it didn't occur to him he was the paternal source of his children's faux vows, "I promise to walk the dog," and "I'll help you pick the grapes." After 6 days of diligently emptying and washing the bucket, on the 7th day he rested. Then the next day he was late for work, and he left the bucket filled with compostables in the sink, and 2 more days passed without him emptying it. The bucket, filled with good intentions, became a sore and smelly point. Fed up, Sheila took the bucket outside to the French terrace, and Paul, taking the hint, walked outside to empty the bucket and discovered a dead mouse. The evening before, a thirsty mouse encountered the bucket and his eyes lit up. He dove in and splashed with joy at his abundance and good fortune until he realized he couldn't get out. Is my fate the same as this mouse? Paul wondered. Am I in over my head with this vineyard? The novel Mousetrap inspired Paul with a scheme for catching Templeton, the rat, who had the nasty habit of using the ledge of the house's scenic picture window as his toilet. It was after harvest season, and with Al Gore on vacation, Templeton scurried about with impunity at night, but the grapes he gorged in summer were gone. Hungry, he stumbled upon the bucket of frothy coffee grounds, discarded wine, soapless water from rinsed dishes, carrot tops, and pomegranate seeds. Templeton was floating in satiated drunkenness when Paul stepped outside in the morning and saw a crocodile snout with whiskers and long teeth smiling at him from his heavenly bath of sludge. "At last," Paul said as he thrust the flat-edged shovel into the bucket, pinning the rat to the bottom for his first baptism and last swim. The shovel and guillotine never failed. When Paul asked Sheila about starting a second compost pile closer to the house near the vegetable garden, she adamantly opposed. "We can't have a pile of garbage in the corner of our property. If the corners are messy, the whole vineyard and house will be messy," adding, "Would you mind cleaning your desk?" "After my work is finished." And since vineyarding was never finished, his desk was never clean, except for New Year's Day, when Sheila shoveled everything on his desk into a bag. Paul accepted the small victory of collecting a gallon or two of water from the kitchen sink for the vines each day, although it was just a drop in the bucket. He saved a little more by flushing his toilet less often, a covert operation, because Sheila insisted on flushing twice after number 2, and each time immediately following number 1. Carrie Ann said, "Yellow's mellow," but Sheila was not, and if Paul could clandestinely postpone flushing after a bedtime and wake-up pee, he could save 2 to 3 flushes a day, amounting to savings of 60 to 90 gallons per month. In the end, the year he reduced watering yielded the neighborhood's smallest crop, and when Bluey's nose judged the wines, though Sheila and Paul produced the least, the wine was fine. More importantly, conditioned and strengthened by the lack of water during the worst drought in recorded California history, the next year, when drought continued, their vines survived ratcheted rationing. Things became ugly when the water police created an app so customers could easily and anonymously report water wasters, with neighbors informing on neighbors. Everyone signing up for the app was given a $30 instant credit to the water bill, and since the app also reported real-time water usage, concerned citizens proactively monitored their consumption and were alerted to waste. And if you witnessed a burst pipe or water hog, all you had to do was snap a photo, upload it, and the app automatically determined the location, and you could earn up to $500 in credit depending on the amount of water saved. The app secretly alerted water police when a user used water on a non-use day, and sure enough, a patrol car soon appeared, which caused a decrease in users once rumors spread. Sheila threw a tantrum when the water police declared clothes could only be washed Mondays and Fridays. Why they wouldn't allow washing on weekends when most people had time for it, nobody knew, but that's government for you. "Every day's a weekend for you. Why do you care?" Paul said. Paul was all too willing to forgo having his clothes and once-used towels washed daily. After his brief shower, he preferred hanging his damp towel outside to dry naturally, like his skin. Of course, if Paul's towel touched one of Sheila's freshly laundered items drying outside, she would rewash the whole load. Paul threatened to report her to the water police, which would have been the first case of spouse versus spouse reporting, but he couldn't bring himself to touch the app's send button when he remembered he'd have to pay her fine, which was greater than the reward. New homes were engineered to recycle dishwater and shower water that flowed outside the landscaping. Of course, that only worked for new homes and was the reason for the toilet-to-tap program, so everyone's wastewater could be cleaned and recycled. That year, building new homes was halted as the county withheld water meters for new construction. The county offered avocado growers up to $15,000 if they switched to grapevines or another water-friendly crop. That sounded like a good idea to Joe, always willing to accept free money from the government he hated. He was incensed by a $500 bill from the county for an inspection fee to verify the conversion. "When did you send the inspector over?" he asked the agency by telephone. July 27th. Joe checked his calendar and answered, "We didn't let anyone on the property that day. Our property is gated. The only way for someone to get in is if we let them in, or to climb over the wall and trespass." "Did your inspector illegally trespass on our property?" That was the last Joe heard about the bill from the government, whom he suspected charged residents fees for work they didn't do. When you use less water, your bill should go down, right? Not at all, because the water utility must increase rates to cover fixed expenses. Carrie Ann learned this when her water bill doubled and crossed the $1,000 threshold one month. There were several reported incidents of water robbery, where thieves tapped into a victim's water line and made off with a tanker full. "Who has the ability to do that?" says Sheila. "I bet it was Miguel, that pirate." Plants and trees without water suffered the inevitable. Paul, already drought fatigued, observed leaves of his treasured avocados turn yellow, then brown. The fingertips of branches afflicted with neuropathy break off from drought-induced leprosy, then their limbs, and finally death. Avocados, blood oranges, proteas. Over half the trees and shrubs he and Sheila planted, gone. There was one consolation for out-of-state travel. When Paul visited the East Coast on business, he took long, hot baths, his skin redder than the lobsters he ate, and shriveled more than the raisins that bled into Jane's port. A critical emergency alert was blasted to citizens' phones, warning extraordinary water restrictions would be implemented in response to the catastrophic shortage. Now that got everyone's attention. "Are you going to put in a well?" Paul asked Carrie Ann, who had the $40,000 to drill it. "Heck no," she replied. "Did you hear the water police are going to cap Joe's?" "How did they find out?" "Someone ratted on him. I wonder if it was Miguel," Paul asked. "Can they really cap it?" "They are the government. They declared a critical water emergency, can do anything they want to secure water. No wonder he hates the government so much." The tribal elders of the native Kumeyaay gathered for a rain dance. The bishop, who had a prayer for everything, composed a prayer for rain, recited by the faithful each Mass. "O God, Heavenly Father, who by your Son Jesus Christ has promised to all those who seek your kingdom and its righteousness all things necessary to sustain their life, send us in this time of need such moderate rain and showers that we may receive the fruits of the earth to our comfort and to your honor through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen." He included the word moderate because when it rains, it pours, and the last thing we needed were downpours that washed homes down mountainsides. The followers of the Prophet Muhammad, too, knelt in the mosques of Kearney Mesa and La Mesa and bowed towards the holy city of Mecca, entreating Allah the Merciful, Allah the Great, Allah the One and Only, for merciful precipitation. And up the highway at a temple in Riverside County, those who put their faith in the gods of Hinduism, feeling the wrath of Lord Shiva, who threatens to destroy the world, perhaps this time with drought, made a pyramid of hands under the red dot of their foreheads and prayed. Would God, Yahweh, Allah, and Ganesh hear the cries of the people and answer the prayer uniting them?